Hey guys, welcome back to the Fit Disciple podcast. My name's Adam. Today I have a special guest. This is JT Tapias. He's a clinical pastoral counselor, nutrition sociologist, and founder of the Empty Your Bucket nutrition plan. We've been talking a little bit. He's been in this for quite a minute and, gave his life to the Lord relatively late for some people, 30 years old roughly. But like most people should say, God radically changed his life. But then he also took his passion for fitness, for soccer, for just nutrition in general, and he started helping change people's lives. So, JT, thanks for joining me, brother. I really appreciate it. We really got to chat just a little bit, but I'm hoping to get to know you a little bit better today.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Thanks for having me. Excited to be
Yeah.
here.
So, if you were to introduce yourself to a total stranger, how would you introduce yourself? What would you tell people you do? And maybe what would you want them to know right out of the gate about you?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been knocking food out of people's hand for the past 25 years. April 23rd, it'll be
That's funny.
25 years. It's crazy how long. I mean, and it doesn't seem that long, but that's what I've been doing for two decades plus. And yeah, it was coincidental. I believe it was a God incidence that I got into the industry. You want to go from the start? You want to go from
Yeah, dude,
you tell me.
just give us
Yeah.
like, how'd you get into this, dude? I mean, you,
Yeah.
you know, I think you played soccer at a pretty high level, which some people will be like, "Well, you're set for life, right?" But what were the plans there? Kind of how'd you get into this, and what made you want to go down this avenue? Because it's not the easiest, right?
Yeah.
But it is rewarding. So maybe give us a little background.
Sure. So when people look at me, they're like, how did this gringo end up playing soccer in Spain and Mexico and all these places? But I'm actually Colombian. So I was born in a place called Medellín, Colombia. I was born to a pretty interesting family. My mother was a professional singer. She was signed to a label, doing really, really well. My dad was a pharmaceutical sales rep without a license.
Well, when you said Medellin, I kind of figured
Yeah.
out.
And so he was quite the character. He put my mom through hell and back, and my mom just had enough. And he was a pretty powerful man in the country, and so we had to literally escape. My sister was
Mhm.
6, I was 1. My sister was born in Brooklyn because my mother had been here before, but I was born in
Mhm.
Medellin, and so I couldn't get a permit to get out of the country. So we actually ended up coming here illegally back in 1979 when the Coast Guard was one man strong. So came into the Miami shores and stayed there for a little while in Miami, ended up in Jamaica, Queens. We lived in a third floor apartment. We were super poor. We used to collect pennies to eat Lipton soups. And my mother felt the pinch and she decided to go back to singing. That's what she did well. This is 1979, 1980. So just a little bit of dark history here in America. That was called the Colombian Bonanza. And that's
Mhm.
when the Colombian cartels had come to the US to storm the US with cocaine.
Mhm.
And so, it was disco and cocaine. And, here's my mom, she's young, pretty. She's singing at these nightclubs. And this is where these drug dealers hung out. And so they saw a young lady from back home and they said, oh, let's help her. And their way of helping her was bringing her into the business. And so we became a house bank for the next 3 years. We lived in a apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment. My sister, my mother, and I stayed in one bedroom, and the other 2 bedrooms were stacked with money to the ceiling. I remember a very interesting guy used to come in with duffel bags and drop off money, pick up money several times a week. Our job was just basically to be a normal looking family. But we were stashing, I mean, at any given time, there were $2-3 million stacked up to the ceiling. And so, I like to joke and say, while kids were playing with, Legos, I was playing with stacks of money. And, so, I kind of grew up that way. My mom, she, I guess, did a good job per se in that industry. And she started running her own cruise from 1980 to 1992. In 1992, she was indicted by the Southern state of Manhattan for all sorts of charges. She was going to go away for 25 years. She got a tip from someone inside that, they were going to put her away. So she wrote a letter to the judge and said, hey, I know what I've done is wrong. I stay and pay for it, but I have 2 young kids and I'm not going to leave them in the system. And so we're fleeing. Right. So we went back to Colombia. crazy time in Colombia, 1992, 93. The infamous Pablo Escobar was being, prosecuted by, I mean, he declared war against the Colombia. And then there was CIA, DEA, Interpol, just all these agencies that were after him. Unfortunately, we were part of, well, my mother was part of that organization. And so, whereas here in the States, we were chased by the DEA, there was the DEA, the cops, the bad guys, and everyone else. And so pretty
Good Lord.
traumatic. There were curfews. We had to be home by 6:30 because bombs were going off in the city, drive-bys. It
Mm-hmm.
was pretty bad. And so my mom said, "This is crazy. I got to get my kids out of here." So they sent me back to New York City to stay with a family that was supposed to take care of me. But this family was in the same business and they were crazy. They were cowboys. And so, man, I just got fed up. I picked up this duffel bag, this book bag I had, and left. And ironically, at the age of 14, for 14 months, I was homeless in the streets of New York City. I was what they call a hybrid, and so I wasn't living on the street the whole time, but from time to time I would stay with friends. Other times I'd stay out. And I joke and say, if you're going to be homeless, don't pick New York as your destination. Pretty rough. So, it was, I believe it was providential. I mean, now looking back, it was just, everything was organized in such a way where, those 14 months were rough, but I was playing soccer, amateur soccer at the time. And, I lived right across the street from Flushing Meadows Park, which is, ironically, one of the places where they play the best amateur soccer in the world.
Yep.
And so I got to play with a lot of guys that had played Division I in England and Jamaica and all these different countries. And I mean, it was just great preparation for me. I was playing with a team there. A scout saw me and said, "Hey, we've been watching you now for the last couple of weeks. We like what we see. We want to take you to Spain to try out." And so jumped in a plane, went to the north of Spain, and ended up in a city called Zaragoza, right in the middle of Madrid and Barcelona. And did my tryout there. And first, 7 minutes on the pitch, they pulled me aside and I signed my first contract. And so I ended up staying there, and a lot of cool things happened. Some of my wildest dreams came true. Some of the people that I idolized on TV were, now teammates, and did that for a little while in Spain. Got traded off to a team in Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico, a team called Tecos, and played there for 2.5 years. And at the age of 24, my career came to an end. I wasn't getting enough playing time. 24 is, even though you're still young, if you're not playing in the initial 11 lineup, you start to kind of get left back. And so I figured I can still go back to the States, get an education, play for a Division II team and back in the U.S. college team, and get my education paid for. So that's what I did. I came back, ended up in Tampa, Florida.
Great town.
Yeah, amazing. Tampa's amazing. So, I don't know how much you know about. I mean, you look like an athlete. I don't know if you played any sports, but when
Basketball. I played basketball in high school. I do jiu-jitsu now.
Okay, yeah. So when you play at a competitive level, you're getting paid to kind of do what you love to do, and all of a sudden, that dream ends. Man, it's probably one of the worst things that can happen to a person. It's like, how do you top that? And so, I was trying to just figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I had to take inventory of my strengths and weaknesses. And I had been around coaches and trainers. And as I mentioned earlier, Malcolm Gladwell says that, if you do anything for 10,000 hours, you pretty much are considered an expert in the field.
Sure.
So went back to school, got my certifications, opened up my first gym in probably one of the most gym saturated areas in the world, 30 gyms in a 5-mile radius. I mean,
it was a church in the South.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, Adam, but Tampa is considered the number 2 most vain city in America.
I just want to know what's one. I didn't know Tampa was, but what's number 1, bro?
Apparently it's California, somewhere in,
I would not
Hollywood
doubt
or
that in any way. Yeah.
So, I mean,
that's amazing though. I didn't know that.
Yeah. My question was like, how do you even figure that out? Well, what they do is they actually, they look at the number of spas and sort of self-care businesses in the area. And that's how they actually come up with a list. So, I went into the saturated market. I knew 2 things early on. One, I wanted to bring a great product to the marketplace. I came with that spirit of an athlete, very competitive. And my goal was obviously to put out a great product, but then also
Mhm.
differentiate ourselves from the competition. And so we realized that everyone in the area was focusing on different training methods. This was progressive overload. This was a hit training studio.
Mhm.
But no one was really tapping into nutrition, practical nutrition.
Mm.
And the common theme was, people complaining about yo-yo dieting and all these things. And hey, I've tried all these diets and nothing's worked for me, or I rebounded. So, we just dug in, and that was kind of what we pursued hardcore. And we grew pretty quickly. We had people from all over that were coming doing our transformation programs. And so we grew that. We grew that big, big, big time. I had stealthily in that process because I was a man of the world. I didn't grow up with a dad. My mom was always kind of doing her thing. So, um, the only men that I had around me were street soldiers. And so just really bad, just a bad tape playing in my head of what success meant.
Mhm.
And, I grew up in a very materialistic home where I was told that I was whatever I had in my pocket. And so I grew up thinking, hey, if I'm successful, then I'll be fulfilled. Then I'll have this peace and this joy that everyone talks about. And so I went hard pursuing that. I feel like I achieved that by the age of 27. I had rental properties. I had, the two cars that I had always dreamed of, and things were looking up, things were looking great. But in that process, I had developed a stealth addiction to Adderall. I was drinking heavily on the weekends.
Mhm.
Here I was Monday through Friday promoting fitness and nutrition, preaching fitness and nutrition. On the weekends, I was destroying my body with drugs and alcohol. And so I woke up on a Sunday after just a binge, and I was hungover mentally, spiritually, physically. It was pretty bad. My heart was skipping a beat, literally skipping a beat. Kind of, I was just so depressed. I started writing a letter, and I was sending a letter to my sister telling her I was going to check out. And so I had gotten diagnosed with an atrial fibrillation, a flutter based on my lifestyle. So everything was just felt like it was crashing down.
Sure.
And
Can imagine.
so as I'm writing this letter, I'm a counselor by trade. And so my training kicked in, and I'm like, man, I'm in a bad place. This whole suicide ideation. And
Mhm.
you're just trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this the easiest, fastest way? You're in trouble, right? You're not in a good place.
Very.
So I said, you know what? I'm going to reach out to someone and see if they have a better idea, right? Because this is not looking too good. So interestingly enough, I would bump into this guy in the elevator on Saturdays, only on Saturdays. I think I've bumped into this guy a handful of times, only on Saturdays. I was on my way to the nightclub to get faded into the night. He was coming back from church with a Bible under his arm and a beautiful wife. He had a beautiful wife, good looking dude. And man, he just exuded like this peace and this calmness to him, this genuine, I can't explain it, but there was something very genuine about him. And so I picked up the phone and I said, hey brother, I know we don't know each other well, but man, I don't think I have another day in me. And he said, what do you mean? And, I said, I'm going to take myself out. He said, whoa, 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 whoa. He said, those are big words. He said, don't do anything silly. Let me come over. So he comes over, Bible in hand. He sits across from me, and he says, let me tell you what God's doing in my life.
I like
And I
that. He's
looked at,
telling you what he's doing in his life, right?
yeah.
I like that.
And
No, I like
so,
that.
yeah, this dude was a club promoter, and he, in his BC years, he was a big club promoter, big party
Mhm.
kid. And, Jesus transformed his life. So he's like, let me tell you what Jesus is doing in my life. And I look at him and I go, man, you're going to have to give me something else, because I don't believe in God. And
Mhm.
he looked at me, Adam, like if he were speaking about gravity, like with that certainty, like gravity is real.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, he says, God is real regardless of what you believe. He says, and so is the devil, and he has an agenda. I'm like, okay. And I said, what's his agenda? He says, he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He says, but Jesus has come to bring life and life abundantly.
Mhm.
And so I'm looking at this guy and I said,
Yeah.
okay, what do we do with that? He said, well,
Can
he
you
says, what do you,
unpack that a little bit for me?
yeah. He said, what are you doing tonight? And I said, well, I was going to kill myself, but if you have better plans, we'll go do
Okay, but
that.
if you have other plans.
And so, I reluctantly got in his car, and we ended up going to church and showed up to this beautiful building. I had preconceived notions about church because
Of course,
I can't
we
really
all
say
do.
I was a Catholic, but culture. I was a cultural Catholic, like a
Yeah.
lot of the Catholics, you kind of grow up into it. So that's all I knew about church. I'd never been to an evangelical church. So I show up to this beautiful church and I see two things I absolutely love. I see beautiful women and Starbucks, and I'm like, let's go. I'm like,
Hey,
I'm
by
like,
hook or by crook, we're gonna get you in there, bro.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, Jesus, all right.
That's
I remember walking into the sanctuary, and the pastor that day was doing a topical message on the book of Job. And it hit me like a lightning bolt. Obviously I had never heard of Job, but I looked over at my buddy and I said, did you tell this guy what I have going on? He said, dude, this is a mega church. He says, there's about 800 people in this place. He goes, that's how God speaks to us. So I said, okay, service is over. I thanked him. I said, let's go. He goes, no, let's go to the prayer team. So
what?
I'm like,
You're not getting away.
prayer team. Yeah. Like, what is a prayer team? And so we start walking towards this guy. He looked like a young Justin Bieber, like an innocent Justin Bieber. And I'm thinking, man, what is this Justin Bieber dude going to do for me? And I just, got up close and he said, what are we praying for? And kind of unloaded. And he just kind of opened his eyes because I didn't hold back. I told him everything I had going on. And he basically said, close your eyes, let's pray. And I checked out. I was so embarrassed. I can't remember a word the guy said, but there was a moment in time where he was doing his thing where I literally felt like I had put my finger in an electrical socket and I just felt electricity come through my body. And I started bawling like a baby. I grew up in an environment where men don't cry.
Same.
You get in a lot of trouble if you kind of express emotion. And so I was blown away that I was crying in front of this young looking Justin Bieber guy. And, I thanked him. I walked away. I think I was the last one to leave that church that day. And as I'm walking out of that church, this older man with kind of this fatherly sort of, I don't know, just figure, not physically, but just like in his demeanor, he comes up to me and he says, son, why are you crying? To which I was just a mess. No one had ever called me son before. And so, man, I'm just bawling like a baby. And he looks at me, he says, I said, I have no idea why I'm crying. So I have no idea why I'm here. And he said, oh, I know why you're here. And he says, and I know why you're crying. He says, and I have something for you. So he hands me a Bible. It's a new believer's Bible. And I said, I've tried to read this before. I can't understand it. He said, I think you're going to understand it now. I said, okay. He says, where do I start? He said, the Gospel of John. So I said, where's that? So he opened it up for me. I folded a page, thanked him, walked out of that church. And man, I remember waking up the next day and I felt like a 3,000-pound gorilla had fallen off my shoulders. Like for the first time I could breathe again. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and not feeling that shame that characterized me, just looking at myself in the mirror. And man, Jesus just started to heal my heart progressively. I have no issues with 12-step or AA or Celebrate Recovery or any of those programs. God just uprooted me from the world, and all those vices, all the things that I was hooked to just vanished.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was a radical transformation, man. I sold the gym. I ended up going back to my business partner and saying, hey, I'm out. I don't know what happened to me the other day, but I need to go figure it out. I said, I know people come here to get abs, but not Jesus. And I'm interested just in helping people get Jesus. So I left, took a 2-year sabbatical. That was kind of my desert time. In that process, I fasted, prayed, I meditated on the word, and I just asked God to recycle my life for his glory. And man, those were 2 amazing years. I met my wife. We dated for 3 months, got married on month 4. We're going on 13 years. We have 2 little ones, a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. He called me back into the fitness industry just through a lot of prayer. He impressed upon my heart this idea of going back and being a lighthouse for him. Still didn't know how we were going to do that because I felt like fitness was such a superficial, such a vain thing. But I was obedient. We went back and we started Fit Method 413. Our running joke a couple months after opening Fit Method was that we would lead more people to the Lord doing squats and lunges than most churches any Sunday. So
Pain has a way of doing that.
Oh man, yeah. We became this parachurch ministry, and
that's awesome.
Amazing. We ran that for an extra 7 years, and then we sold the gyms in Tampa 4.5 years ago. We moved here to Port St. Lucie, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I came here to go to seminary in Jupiter, and yeah, it's been a ride.
So first of all, when you start with where my family was in the cartel,
Yeah,
it's serious, man. So it's amazing the journey you've taken and how
yeah,
God's just kind of like, if you look back, you can see him weave this level of trust and lack and needing and him, finding you. You're ready to give up. He finds you. It's just amazing how God can do that. And on top of that, take everything else you learned, even
mhm,
the bad stuff, and help you to change in people's lives. It's amazing.
absolutely. It's been a puzzle, right? A
Yeah.
lot of the stuff, it's been such a puzzle, man. A lot of the stuff that he helped me with, like getting out of my
Mhm,
that lifestyle and the vices and the addictions, and
mhm,
I think what most people don't realize. I mean, you have two types of people. You have the cradle Christians, the ones that grow up in the church,
mhm.
right? And that's all they know. And praise God for that. That's what I'm praying for my daughters, right?
Sure.
Um, but then you have the guys like me. I didn't grow up in church, and
You're born by
you
fire.
just you have all this conditioning from the world, right?
Mhm.
Everything, like how you date, how you interact, everything is very transactional, and so what I learned was that even with what I do now, where we work mostly with people that have stealth food addictions. I mean, I think
Mhm.
we're all addicted to food to some extent, but even those processes of not just giving behavior modifications to help these people overcome these challenges, but understanding that the only one that can truly heal you is Jesus. And when you bring those processes in, the process of discipling someone, walking with someone, praying with someone alongside those behavior modifications, man, it is incredibly powerful. So I do
Oh,
that now for people with food challenges, but for me, the way I learned it was through my other vices, which was the alcohol and the drugs and the serial
sure.
dating and all the other things that I was so addicted to. So that's why I say it's like a puzzle.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, man. Your story's incredible. I'm sure it's got a lot more twists and turns to it too. But let's just chat because you're talking about helping people, and that's basically the same type of coaching that I'm doing, which is the focus
Mhm,
is to help believers in particular and those because I come from the church space. So I've
mhm, mhm,
pastored, we help plant churches, we've been missionaries in Africa. My thing is I just really got tired of seeing Christians sacrificing their health on
mhm.
the altar of ministry and trying to, do this thing for the Lord while their families are spiraling out of control, their health's in the tank. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I feel like we're kind of in a similar space. So tell me a little bit about your empty the bucket nutrition plan. Like, what is that? Like, what are we? You're obviously choosing those words very specifically. So can you
Yep.
give me a little background on that and your thought around it?
Yeah, yeah. So, empty your bucket plan. Actually, the name and the actual process started prior to me being a Christian. And so,
Mm,
initially it was just an effective, practical way to empty out excess glycogen storages and how to do that, in a proficient way. But then so much more came into that empty your bucket idea. I'm sure you're familiar with Blaise Pascal and
hmm
his famous saying of, every man has a God-shaped hole in their heart that can only be filled by Jesus.
hmm
And so when Jesus is not occupying that bucket, okay, we're just basically we're going after all the different things out there, all the different devices that the enemy has to lure us in, right? Call it,
hmm
lust and food, which is I say food is the Christian crack. You know, um,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
it's like
totally, dude.
we leave the world and we leave all its vices, and we come to Jesus, we get baptized, but many of us get baptized with our plates above water, right? Everything gets baptized except the plate. And so, I'm on this mission to, help Christians understand that, um, number one, 1 Corinthians 6:19 says that we're a temple of the Holy Spirit,
Yep,
that we are to treat it as such. I see a lot of Christians treating their physical building more respectfully than their actual temple, right?
yep,
I like to
very true.
say, You would never see a faithful believer bring their week's garbage to the gym, or sorry, to the church, and just dump it in the church. And yet here we are, like, eating everything and anything,
Yep.
and there's just no restraint when it comes to food, because no one is preaching about gluttony. No one is preaching about, we're preaching about self-control, but only towards the bigger, more noticeable sins.
Sure.
And, some of the things I've been able to identify in my work is that an impulse of the flesh is an impulse of the flesh. And so,
It's a good thought.
I, I have guys that will come to me and say, hey, I'm battling with pornography, or, or lust, or any of these things. And, your typical counseling advice, pastoral counseling advice is, man, okay, you got to have someone keeping you accountable. You obviously got to be in the word. You got to pray, all these things, which, yeah, amen to all of that. But what no one is saying is that there's actually a very tactical way to really help the aspect of self-control through the way we actually eat. And when I get into this theologically, a lot of people say, wait a second, well, the flesh has nothing to offer the spirit. And I disagree with that.
Very much.
Right. And so, we are human beings. We're in a physical body, and you can be as spiritual as you want to be, but none of us are floating on a cloud. And so we need very practical, not just the descriptive ways to talk about God, but also prescriptive. And so the prescriptive stuff is what oftentimes gets left out from the pulpit. And so, teaching self-control and teaching discipline from a spiritual lens can be done through activating your physiology and taming your hunger with a Christ-centered, right, pursuit.
I agree.
If you do it alone, because a lot of people will say, well, there's plenty of fit people out there that are not spiritual. Yeah, I get it. But when you're actually doing this as an extension of your spiritual disciplines, the way you eat, the way you actually, you responsibly activate your physiology, and you're doing it to glorify God, that's a whole different ballgame.
And very much so. The intentions are very different there, right?
Correct.
I think also, like I share with people regularly, that, you're not just this ghost riding around in this meat machine. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're not like just floating around. And when people say, well, the flesh doesn't really have anything to do with the spirit, that's technically a form of Gnosticism,
Right.
which was a heresy in the New Testament, where they separated the spirit and the body. And if the body was not important, why did the word need to become flesh? Right?
That's right.
To
That's
save us as a whole, because
Yep.
we're supposed to be an integrated being, right?
Yep.
And many of the things that I learn in the spirit, I flesh out literally in the flesh. And many things
100%.
that I do by challenging my flesh create change in my spirit and my character, right? We don't get to separate them, because one's more uncomfortable than the other. Going to church is comfortable. I don't care what anybody says. Doing 20
That's right.
rep squats, have fun. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But what would you say, like, when you, like, we're talking about, you empty your bucket. I really like that thought. I like the thought of, not only do you have this hole that only Jesus can fill, but there's things that we're filling it with,
Right.
and mentalities, habits, mindsets around food and fitness in general. What would you say are some of the major mindset issues that you find Christians running into when
Yeah.
it comes to trying to get their health in order in a spiritual way, in a sense?
Yeah. I oftentimes, what I find with Christians is, first of all, there's a difference between reading your Bible, which we should do, and the Spirit helps us do that. But then we need to understand theology. And I think when there's a disconnect there, it's very confusing. You're all over the place. You don't have a guide. And so I hear a lot of Christians say, well, we are mind, body, and spirit. It's like, no, we're a spirit and we're a body. And then a component of that body is the mind, the will, and the emotions. And so when I often see Christians having a very, very hard time taking intrinsic thoughts and making them practical. And so I had a lady recently she came to a counseling session, and she was trying to figure out, what her why was, because we talk a lot about that intrinsic why, that deep reason to continue to eat well and move and all these things that goes beyond aesthetics, right? So I'm asking her all these questions and she's giving me all these beautiful responses that are intrinsic. Well, I want to glorify God, and and this is an extension. I want this to be an extension of my spiritual disciplines, and I'm like, okay, that's great. That those are all great things that we should do,
Mm-hmm.
but what does that look like, right? How do we do that? And
Mm-hmm.
so Christians have a very hard time taking the intrinsic and making it practical. And so I see that that's one of the biggest challenges is that we hear these great sermons. If we're in healthy churches, we hear these great sermons, but then Monday comes around and we have no idea how to apply those things to our day to
Yeah.
day. And so
Practicality is a real thing.
yeah. So a big thing of what we do, we meet on Tuesdays. We have a 15-minute prayer meeting that we have every Tuesday. Wednesdays, we have our temple stewardship Bible study where we really, really get into the theology of temple stewardship. Fridays is more on the practical side of nutrition and that sort of thing. But in that process, what I've realized is that it's just I like to say it's the discipleship your church missed. And it's that practical aspect of taking intrinsic truths that come from the Bible and making them very practical. And so instead of saying to someone, hey, you got to be self-controlled because it's one of the fruits of the Spirit. How do you do that? In practical terms, how do you actually do that?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of mindset should you be approaching that with? In other words, is it stoic self-control or is it Christ-centered self-control?
Mm.
Those are two different things. Being able to flesh those things out, being able to put proper theology around these things is super powerful. And people start to recognize, wow, I didn't even know that some of these impulses, some of these desires were sinful. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that I had erected an idol in my heart through food. And so when people start coming to this realization, what comes is healthy conviction that oftentimes moves people in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. What would you give me an example of what a practical approach would be to a theological thought, right? So
Yeah.
when you're working with somebody and you're saying, "Yeah, I know you're feeling this and you feel like the Lord wants you to do this." Okay, but what does that look like
Right.
tomorrow at 10 a.m.? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
When you're tired and you're mad and you're
Yeah.
2 cups of coffee in, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I was complaining to a pastor, friend of mine, and we were getting into this discussion about denominations, and I was
Mhm.
kind of bringing up attributes from different denominations, right? And I said, the charismatics are awesome. They have this zeal for the Lord, like they want to make the Lord move, yay or nay, right? And
Yeah,
there's value to that. They're
the real
out there and they're
passion there,
sharing
yeah.
their faith and they're passionate, and all these things, and they're fervent in their prayer life and fasting and all these things. Then you have the non-denominational people that, they do entertainment really well. They make you feel really, really welcome. But they kind of give you, an appetizer, but not the entree. Then you have the folks over here, the reform folks, and their theology is impeccable. But then when it comes to like the fellowship, it's a little weird. It's a little dry.
Mhm.
They put God in a box. And he came back and he said to me, he said, JT, are you familiar with the word ortho?
Mm.
And I said, yeah, orthodox. And this is where we get the word orthopedic from.
Mhm.
The word basically means to make right, to see in the correct way, right? So we need orthodoxy. So we need proper theology, right? So
Yes.
this is the thought. We need proper orthopathy, which is the right feeling. And then we need
Mhm.
right orthopraxy, which is the practice. So we
The right practices.
think, right? We think, we feel, and we act. If you have the right thoughts, you produce the right feelings that produce the right actions, that produce the right habits, that create a Christ-like character.
Very good.
All three of those belong to biblical Christianity. True
Yes.
biblical Christianity has all three of those in place. So we have to give people the right thought around what food is, what's
Mhm.
food's primary intention, how does it serve? Yes, we can fellowship. Yes, we can enjoy it. We don't demonize food groups or any of those things, but we need healthy boundaries.
Mm.
And so we need to get people to think correctly about food. Number one, it's not bad. Food in itself is not bad.
No, it's amazing.
Right. It's amazing. And God gave it to us and we should take advantage, but we need
Absolutely.
boundaries because we have a
Mhm.
tendency because of our fallen nature to kind of corrupt those things, right? If not seen well. So bringing that into its proper place and allowing people to understand, look, food is in itself is not sinful, but when it controls you, it is, you know? And now giving them the behavior modifications. So they have the thought. If that produces an emotion, a positive emotion in them, they go, okay, I realize I need to serve the Lord. And this is another way to do that, a very practical way to do that. And by
Mhm.
the way, as I'm doing that, because how you do anything is how you do everything, I'm learning to be self controlled and disciplined, not in my
Mhm.
own will, but through the Holy Spirit. Right. And that convicts me, brings a good emotion, a good conviction. Then I can start practicing those things. And that's where the behavior modifications actually work. Behavior modifications alone can't work.
No.
Right. I tell people often, I was speaking at a church in Pittsburgh the other day. I said, imagine if I showed up here and I said, you guys just have to behave.
What does that
That's it.
even mean?
And then I just closed my Bible and left, right? Like rules have never changed anyone.
Mhm.
And so, you got to impact at the thought level that impacts the emotions and then impacts the actions. And when you do that properly, sequentially, and you have hyper accountability behind that, it's very, very powerful.
Very
And,
strong.
you know, I think the biggest challenge, Adam, and you would probably agree with me, is that, you know, the structure and the state of the church as it is right now, it's not set up for proper discipleship
I would agree.
because we've built these massive structures. We have these mega churches. They're doing their best to cover people's needs and their small groups and things like that. We have these we have churches that come in and say, hey, we had 200 decisions this past weekend for Christ.
Mhm.
But when you go back and you look at every one of those 200 people, no one knows if they're growing, if they've come back to the church. So they
Sure.
kind of get Alka-Seltzered, right? They take the plunge and then they disappear.
Just kinda dissipate, yeah.
Right. And so there's no follow-up, there's no discipleship. And I think in that it just gives way to a lot of confusion. And so our goal inside of our communities is being there to disciple people through this
Very good.
area of fitness and nutrition, but with a Christ-centered idea behind it. And the idea here is not to get fit. The idea here is to become a great steward of your temple, and in that process, getting
Mhm.
closer to Christ. And if that happens, then awesome. Our job is done.
I really like that. I like that thought process. I usually start similarly, but I start with more of an identity purpose, an identity
Sure.
connection with people. And when people are like, "Well, what's my why?" And I usually am just like, "Well, what are some of the
Boldness.
labels you go by in life?" Right?
Yeah.
You go by mom, you go by wife, you go by, you know, pastor, you go by these labels. Those kind of start putting in some highlights on probably the potential identities that you are following in life, you know?
Mhm,
So it's like,
mhm,
okay, well, once we find out those, well, now let's start thinking through practical ways to enhance those,
mhm, mhm.
but live from those identities, not the other way around, right? So it's
That's right.
it's a great thought process, man. I find people, Christians in particular, really good at thinking deep around Jesus. Right? Just like you were saying, we're really good at thinking like and seeing Jesus in all the things in life. And then when it comes to like, hey, how much you plan on eating at lunch?
Yeah, yeah.
What are you doing? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, what are we ordering? Are we getting the foot long? Is that what we're getting? You know,
Yeah.
it's like we start really deviating into we separate out Jesus from just normal life in general. And
Mhm.
I think this is what you're talking about is a great way of just bringing Jesus into those normal everyday decisions that
Yep.
are gonna affect and impact your life greatly. So, it's
Yeah,
amazing, dude.
yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so much, man. You think about I tell people if you can't tame if you're at the office and they bring in donuts and you can't tame your hunger, what do you think is gonna happen when you're in a business deal and something shady comes up and you either have to be ethical and Christ-like and walk away from that because it doesn't serve your purpose as a
Mhm.
Christian, or you're just gonna go for it because no one's gonna find out. If you can't hold back from that donut, what makes you think that you're going to hold back from bigger temptations, right?
Yep.
And oftentimes there's such a disconnect because people will say, well, that's so different, JT. Like, I would never cheat on my wife. Like, I would never, you know, and it's like, man, listen,
you know?
exactly. I'm like, be careful, right? Right.
Mhm,
We're called to walk with fear and trembling,
mhm,
and we can't give the enemy, um, you know, we can't give them the ability to influence us. So not that we can control everything, but I just think that when you really take care of these internal disciplines,
mhm,
you know, how you take care of your body, you're waking up early intentionally, you're meal prepping, you're not because you want to look a certain way. That's a byproduct of doing that, but because you want to serve the Lord, because you want to be a temple of the Holy Spirit. You start adding all of these little disciplines. What do you think is going to happen to your devotional life? It's going to be enhanced.
mhm.
You know, you're being disciplined here. You're going to start being disciplined on this end as
Yep,
well. And so that's the idea, is really to
I love it.
connect the pieces, help people really understand that how you do anything is how you do everything, that you got to start somewhere, that if you actually tighten up in these areas, then the more important things also start to fall into place and it
Yep,
becomes a system. And so creating a system around that is a big part of what we do.
that's amazing, dude. Have you ever read
Yeah.
you touched a lot on discipline. I touch a lot on disciplines, not necessarily the character of being a disciplined person,
Mhm, mhm.
but having disciplines. Have you ever read Dallas Willard's The Discipline like, what yeah, exactly, dude, amazing, right?
Amazing
Like,
book.
and try reading it in one sitting, I dare you, right? Okay, exactly. Is that yeah,
Yeah.
Richard Foster. I have the same thing, and I have the workbook, all of it, right?
Yep.
The thing
Yep.
that sticks out to me there is, first of all, I'm more impressed with you now because we're reading the same books. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You just literally just confirmed my own biases. No, but the point in there is that you will play the game the way you practice it, right?
100%.
You will only play at the level in which you practice. And
Right.
if you don't practice telling your flesh no, well, when something really big comes up where your flesh is the thing you're going against, you have no practice in telling it no, right? Like
Absolutely.
that lady comes on to you at work, or there's an opportunity for you to take money or do something shady or,
Hmm.
cheat on your spouse or whatever it is. If you're not practicing saying no,
Yep.
and as
Yep.
Arnold would say, getting in the reps, if you're not
Yeah. Yeah.
getting in the reps, you're not going to perform, right?
Yeah, 100%. You always fall to the level of your training, right? You default
Exactly.
to the level of your training. So, yeah,
Exactly.
I tell people all the time, the ability to say no to that piece of cheesecake is training you to say no to bigger things. The ability to mimic pain through training your body and putting yourself through
Mhm.
discomfort is training you for adversity. And if you start to look at it from that perspective, then it takes a whole different, you know, idea. It's no longer I'm going to go work out because I need to get fit or I need to look a certain way. Nothing wrong with that, but there's something bigger behind it.
I'm
And
becoming something else,
that's
right?
right. That's
Like
right.
literally. When you
That's right.
I don't mean to interrupt, I just get excited, right?
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
excited because I'm like, when you get to the place where you can choose difficulty
Yeah.
instead of avoiding it at all costs, like many of us do, and many of us spent years of our lives doing. But when
Yeah.
you can choose difficulty because you know the razor's edge of that thing is going to trim you into the thing you're hoping to become. And hope alone is not enough.
That's right.
It's faith and deeds, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So a lot of people are having faith for God to do something in their lives and they're just sitting on the couch waiting,
Yeah.
but no one ever got fit. No one's temple ever got straightened out through hope. So I love that. So yeah, I'm getting excited because
Yeah. No, you're echoing James, right? And I mean, I love the Bible, but I have to say the book of James is just so incredible when you think
it's
about it,
such a
right? Like,
punch in the face.
it is, and when you think about James, and you're like, imagine growing up with the Messiah, like the
As your
wisdom
brother,
there
bro.
as your brother, right?
Like your older brother. Jeez.
So I feel like when I'm reading James, he's giving me these insights that Jesus probably sat with him and taught him, and he was like, dude, like this is how it works. Like, you know, faith without works is dead, and you can't just go around with this lofty theology and not do anything with it. Like you got to put it to work. And so you ask Christians all the time. I don't do this to shame them, but to bring healthy conviction. I'll have a group of Christians and I'll say, can I by a raise of hands, can you tell me when was the last time you shared the gospel? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll see a couple of hands go up. It's like, great. Can you tell me if you were able to actually disciple those people? And rarely do any hands go up, right? So when you think about the book of Acts and when the Holy Spirit fell on all 3,000 of those people, that spirit, the Holy Spirit was given to us to share the gospel. That was the purpose of it. And if we're not doing that, then how are we activating the Spirit of God? How are we growing? We want to grow, but we're just sitting there consuming. I don't know if you heard the story of the Mexican guy that was 560 pounds. They had to bulldoze his house to get him out, to take him to the hospital. I think of that all the time with the church. Like, we're sitting there consuming good theology and not doing anything with it.
Mhm.
And so
We're obese
man,
spiritually, you know?
exactly. And so, man, I just want to be that bulldozer that goes in and goes, hey, like, let's do something. Like, let's not
Yeah.
just sit around.
Agreed.
And if you've come to Jesus in faith and repentance, man, you've arrived. Now go do something. Let's go do something, you know? And it's been incredible, man. It's not just the fitness aspect. Our community is very encouraging. We see people that have been walking with the Lord for years. A lot of them are cradle Christians, and they haven't heard any of this stuff. They haven't heard, they'll tell you, we've never heard a sermon on gluttony ever. You know?
If anything, you hear the opposite.
That's
And
right.
I'm not judging anybody, but we
Yeah.
hear the opposite. It's like, as soon as we mention fasting, we make a joke about it. Like, I'll bet everybody just got hungry. And, like, I would hear preachers say, I'm not doing what Paul said. I'm buffeting my body,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like, they don't drink alcohol, but, you got an A1C of 9. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, okay, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a thing, dude.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And so, that's the goal. And I love that you're doing what you're doing. Cause it sounds like we're basically, we have that desire to see the body of Christ get healthy in
100%.
mind, body, and spirit. And, we need more people doing that out there. So,
What
I
would
commend you
what
for
would
that.
you tell a believer right now who's listening, right?
Yeah.
Who's like, okay, I get it. All right, you guys shut it. All right, I get it. You've convinced me.
Yeah.
What the heck do I do
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Right? Because most people are going to be like, oh, I need a diet plan. I need a workout plan. I need,
Oh, man.
what is the practical next step, JT?
I'm 47 years old. I'll be 48 April 30th.
You look great.
Thank you. I have a copeland. It's preserving me.
That Florida
But,
sun, hey, tan looks good on anybody, brother. I'm going to just tell you right
right?
now. I heard a guy say one time, he's like, even fat looks better tan.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying?
100%. My grandfather passed away at 97. He would, he was always tan. I was like, why are you so tan at 97? He's like, wrinkled skin looks good when it's tan.
100%. It looks better,
Yeah.
dude.
But no, man, I keep it very simple. One of the things I often say is, we just want to tackle things at once. We want to eat the elephant in one bite. And I think that thought is so overwhelming.
Mhm.
And, you have someone, it's different when you're in shape, but when someone is carrying extra weight, they feel locked in their bodies, and they're like, man,
Mhm.
I just have way, so much work to do. Where do I even start? And the first thing I say is, man, first thing you want to do is you want to faithfully start praying about this, right? You don't want to tackle this in your own flesh. Try to become, what's the Navy SEAL guy that puts
Dave
out all the work?
Goggins?
Yeah, you don't want to become Goggins. Like I always joke about Goggins. They call him the toughest guy in the world, but he was only married for 7 months. I'm like, that's how tough
Yeah.
marriage is.
I'm on 25 years, bro. Tougher than Goggins.
Yeah. But
Just kidding.
but what I always say is start in prayer. And I have found that one of the best ways to pray is through what you call contemplation prayer. So
Mhm.
activate your physiology, go out and start walking, right? Walking is one of the most powerful things that you can do. It's actually one of my favorite forms of cardio, zone 2 cardio. And you're not beating your body up, you're depleting glycogen at an efficient rate. And so you have that physical aspect, but then it also gives you cognition. You can actually think, you can pray. And so if you're running and you're out of breath, it's hard to pray, right? But when you're walking, you can go for these
you're
prayer
praying when
walks.
you're out of breath. It's just not the same kind of
Yeah.
prayer.
And I don't know about you, Adam, but I'm the type of guy that I can't sit on a couch and just pray. I'll pray for like 5 minutes and then my mind starts to wander. But if I'm moving, if I'm being physical, I can pray for hours.
Hmm.
And so going on these walks and just starting to pray, and the prayer,
Love that.
one of the things I just learned actually from, Richard Foster in the chapter where he talks about prayer is that we have a tendency to pray for the outcome.
Ooh. Okay. Touch on that. Go ahead. Touch on that.
So it's like, God, heal me. Right.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, if, God will heal you if that's his will, but there are little steps that are happening along the way. So instead of praying for the outcome, pray process like.
Yes.
So for example, Lord, bring peace to my heart so that I can hear you. Once you start hearing from the Lord, it's like, okay, Lord, I got it. Lord, keep me consistent because I need to do this thing. Right. Lord,
Hmm.
allow me to see my body as a temple. Step 3, Lord, I'm doing this thing. Allow me to keep my mind focused on you and not on the things of the world. Let me not get distracted with the
Beautiful.
wrong things. And so you're praying
Hmm.
to the outcome, but you're doing it in steps so that
Love it.
you can actually see progress, and progress creates momentum, and that momentum creates motivation, and that motivation provides persistence. And so that's where I would start.
Love it.
Very strategic, very powerful. And you're not doing things in your own will and in your own discipline, which I think is huge.
Yeah. I think um, we're running at about an hour. If you're good to stay, if you need to go,
Yep.
we'll go.
Yeah.
But
No, we're good.
okay. Well, the one thing I really love where you started, because I mean, literally, you sound like a tanner version of me, more handsome version of me saying the same things. You know what I mean? So I find walking to be, well, if you get into like, you're a counselor, so you understand enough about emotional processing and so like EMDR,
Yep.
where you're connecting, opposite sides of the brain so that you
Yep.
can actually put a thought and an experience into place,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
you can,
Yep.
take something out of being like trauma trigger and into something that's I can actually process this and look at it.
Sure.
The same process, the bipedal process of walking, is the same thing as the paddles that are in
I
your
like that.
hands. EMDR, basically, you have these paddles that vibrate in each hand
Hmm.
while you're processing a particular memory, whatever. And it
Hmm.
helps you
Hmm.
connect both sides of your brain so you can like rationally look at it rather than emotionally
Yep.
look at it.
Yeah.
The footsteps do the same thing. That's
I
why
like
you
that.
have
Yeah.
more creativity when you're walking. That's why ideas come to you. That's why you can
That's right.
tap into those emotions and you can pray things that you didn't even think about praying when you were sitting on the couch, but they just come to you. It's because you're tapping into this natural movement that your body and your
Totally.
spirit are now working together, right? It's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep. I love that. I love that. Something very similar to that we were talking about. I don't know if this happens to you. You've heard this. People say, "Oh, God really speaks to me when I'm showering." You ever hear that?
Yeah, all the time, dude. Best prayers you ever had is in the shower, homie.
Right, right, right. And so, the question is like, why does God pick the shower? Well, think about this, right? When the warm water is hitting you, it's very
Okay.
relaxing. You're
Mhm,
secreting dopamine, that neuroreceptor
mhm,
associated with well-being. And because God is he's a good God, and in those good moments and those good feelings is when we are most receptive to. It's not that he doesn't speak to us before that, but when we're in those dopaminic states, we're more receptive to the voice of God. So I tell people all the time, man, there's nothing more powerful than getting in the warm shower and praying or walking or even getting a good workout where you're secreting dopamine and
mhm.
using that time to pray,
Yep.
right? A lot of people are like, oh, the gym is vain. It's vain. Yeah, if you're there for the wrong reasons, but if you're using that time to actually pray and or you're
Mhm,
meditating on scripture or you're listening to, a Christian podcast or a sermon
mhm,
and it's edifying your spirit, man, those are some of the greatest moments,
mhm.
and so
I
I
agree.
think what we're speaking about here is really reframing it from what the world has made it
Mhm,
to be and bringing a Christian covering over it that says, hey, this is this can also be spiritual and it's benefiting me in so many different ways. It's not even funny. And then getting addicted to that feeling, right?
mhm,
I think I traded that the addiction to the drugs and to the alcohol to this dependency on God, and this pursuing of God consistently in every single moment of the day,
Mhm.
and feeling so good and so peaceful about that, that I just fell in love with it and I just kept doing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the amazing thing, and I love this kind of thought process because
Mhm.
I love anything that can help me create a line between the what we end up doing in life is we compartmentalize things. It's like the gym is
That's right.
for vanity, and prayer time in this chair right here is for Jesus
Uh-huh.
time. And then,
Uh-huh.
when I'm cooking, it's for, whatever. But I love any type of practice or thought process that allows me to connect and create continuity between the areas of life that bring enjoyment and fulfillment. So if I can now invest in my physical body while investing in my spirit, while becoming fitter and better in all areas of my life, why would I not want to do that, for one?
That's right.
And then two, why would I put a limitation on it in
Mm.
any way? Right. So I just find I get like pumped about it because I'm like, dude, it's basically freedom. It's process creating freedom and the discipline creating freedom, as old Jocko would say. You know what I mean?
Totally. You know,
So
I, I, um, I, I operate out of this belief system, this theology that says that, are you familiar with this idea of the perseverance of the saints?
not phrased that way, but tell me what you mean.
In other words, even if you decided to run the other way, God has you in the palm of His hand, and you're going nowhere. Like, or as
Yeah, I've experienced that particularly in my life. Yes.
exact, my buddy says, God, Jesus messes you up for the world.
Yes.
And so no matter how much you think something could be fun or tempting, you just can't go back. If you have
No,
genuinely come to faith and repent, you just can't go back, right? The Bible
no.
says that only dogs go back to their vomit,
Yeah.
which is like every time I hear that, I'm like, oh, that's rough, but it's so
Yeah, if you
true.
were miserable when you did it and you weren't saved, imagine how miserable you're gonna be when you know Jesus.
Absolutely. And so in that whole idea of persevering, I think that the Lord really just lures us in a way. And when we can find ways to make it practical, because we hear that the church is losing a lot of people. And once again, I don't know how genuine those salvations are, but we hear that we're losing a lot of people to new age and this
Sure.
transcendence movements and all these new agey movements. But what I think they have on Christianity is the practical aspects of things, right? And so because a lot of people are looking for that practicality, right? And New Age provides that, even though it's a false religion. And so my way is like, okay, I'm not trying to bring anything over here that's not biblical, but how do I make this so practical, so useful, that people actually get excited about getting into their Bible, that people actually get
Mhm.
excited about prayer, you know? Um, and when you can get people to wake up like that, man, it's like a revival,
I love that.
And so, but you have to be very focused on giving people practical things. Otherwise, people just they dissipate,
Mhm.
they go to church, they're disconnected. I think that there's so many levels to spiritual growth. I think the first three is where most people stay, which is a recognition of God. Someone shares the gospel with you. Two is you get discipled, you get trained in the things of God. And three is you go to service some kind of ministry in your church. And that's it. That's where it ends. And to know that there's just so much more. There's so much
Yeah,
more beyond that. Right.
there is so much more, and that's exactly what those books are talking about that we were sharing earlier.
Right. Right. And so being able to really land it, make it practical, give people sort of a path and draw a line is very, very powerful, man. I've seen guys that have just been stagnant in their faith come into our program, lose 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and all of a sudden they're just alive for Jesus again. They're
Yep,
out going on missions trips. They're sharing the gospel. They're
love
discipling
it.
people. It's like, amen.
Yeah, I'll regularly tell people, "Hey, I've not really met many Christians who are defeated in their health and not simultaneously defeated in their faith."
Yikes. Yes, sir.
I haven't
I like
met
that.
many people. There are people who, they might live in a very particular realm of, the way they compartmentalize things.
Mhm.
But almost everybody I know who's like really struggling with their weight and struggling with their
Yeah.
health in general, there's
Yeah.
almost always a spiritual component to that.
100%. And to leave this for another podcast, but I actually think that because sin is an inner web of connections, I often see guys that
Love that.
struggle in the area of gluttony, struggling with lust.
Pornography. Yeah, it's an
It,
appetite problem. It's appetite
exactly. It's an
regulation.
impulse of the flesh, right? And so, and it's not to pick on the
No,
chubby guys. I know plenty of godly chubby guys, but
100%.
the idea there is that there's that inner web of connections. And, it's not just one thing. You're not just addicted to one thing. And so for me, it started with alcohol. Like that was my gateway. And then it just became this other thing. And then that thing unleashed this
Yep.
thing. And it's like this web of sin came into my life that was all interconnected. And Jesus comes in and just kind of smashes all those idols. So I start to see this. And now that's why I have I wouldn't say easier, but it's a lot easier for me to see when people are struggling in certain areas, what to tackle first. Like I
Mm,
said earlier, I've had guys come to my program that are battling with lust, and sure, we're praying, we're keeping them accountable,
sure.
we're in devotion with them, but we're also controlling their food intake, and we're really looking after that piece because it's the most tangible way to show self control and discipline. And so, man, it works beautifully. I've shared
Yeah,
this
it's
concept with
amazing
other
how there's so
pastors.
much crossover, man. There's so much crossover between if you can control the flesh and the appetite just in this area, you start creating leverage, right, in these other areas because they're all connected, right? Your appetite is your appetite. So
Absolutely,
now look, we've been real spiritual, okay?
yeah,
Kinda, I would
yeah,
say.
kind of,
But I would be remiss because I would be remiss to not ask about, okay, man, what's my diet approach?
yeah,
What's the diet approach, bro? What
yeah,
is your preferred fitness approach, right?
yeah,
We all know that all of them work,
yeah,
but
exactly,
what's your preferred one, right?
yeah,
What's your go-to way to help folks with
yeah.
diet and fitness?
This is similar to the question, like, what Bible should I read? What's the best Bible to read? What the one you read every
Which
day?
one? The New Living, bro, is written on a
Yeah,
6th
yeah,
grade
yeah.
level. That's me.
Yeah, yeah. The not inspired version, the NIV. It's like, no, whichever one you pick up and read, that's the best version. But yeah, man, I think, like you said, if you do anything, it'll work. If you follow anything consistently, it's going to work. I think for me, it comes really down to sustainability, which has been our core proposition. If it's not sustainable, then don't do it. It shouldn't be a vacation. It should be a staycation, right? And so we operate in 3 phases: reset, reboot, and excel, and they're all sequential. They all piggyback off of each other. Reset is a modified paleo, and so
Basically what I do.
yeah, it's a semi keto. We're not demonizing starchy carbohydrates, but we realize that they secrete the most insulin, and so what
Yeah,
we're doing is
tap into that real quick. What's your rationale for that? Because I know you understand the science. Like,
yeah,
I've heard you enough already. I already know you know the science.
yeah,
Tell me why you think a modified, basically low carbohydrate, low grain,
yeah.
paleo-like diet works best for most people.
I first of all, you look at the 3 main macronutrients, right? You look at carbs, proteins, and fats. Carbohydrates are not an essential macronutrient. Like starchy
True.
carbohydrates are not an essential macronutrient. Okay, so that automatically tells me, I don't have to necessarily bring in the thing that oftentimes gets people in most trouble. And so if I can actually keep people off of high insulin yielding foods for anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, okay, meaning, but I'm still incorporating fibrous carbs,
Mhm.
which I like the fibrous carbs, especially for digestive purposes and stuff like that. You're
Mhm.
bringing in lean proteins and you're bringing in healthy fats for energy, for hormonal balance and all those things. If you can do that long enough, you end up doing 2 very powerful things. Number one, you reset people's palate, meaning
Mhm.
the sugary, salty stuff that they're so dependent on. This is a counseling. This comes from addiction counseling. So my master's is in substance abuse and eating disorders. One of the things I experienced was, when we were looking at case studies, it was always about drugs and alcohol. We never talked about food. But one of the principles is that in order to overcome any kind of dependency, you must go into abstinence. You can't tell an alcoholic, just downshift and drink beer and it'll be okay.
Just a little bit of beer every day.
It ain't gonna happen,
Don't
right?
work that way.
Right, right. So same thing with food, right? And so it's like you have the macro counters, the point counters, the calorie counters. It's like, oh, you can eat anything as long as you meet your macros. Yeah, but you're always going to be dependent on that stuff. You're never going to overcome the dependency to the insulin spikes that secrete dopamine. So most people in the nutrition world don't understand that because they don't understand the cognitive aspects of nutrition. And all these things work
Agreed.
hand in hand. And so the idea there is to reset your palate, right, from the sugary, salty things that we become very dependent on, so that then you can self-regulate without a coach like me telling you do this or don't do that. Your palate has
Slapping
just
your
changed. And
hand.
as a byproduct of that, you're making better choices on your own.
Mhm.
Second to that is lowering your dopamine set point, which is shot up. So especially for Christians, right? Anytime they get stressed, happy, bored, any of those up, down emotions, what they're doing is they're reaching for food, right? Because
Mhm.
they're not partying, they're not drinking, they're not doing all this stuff, but then they leave the food, which is a safe way to mitigate emotions. So when
Mhm.
we actually regulate that through bringing them into abstinence, what we notice is that, self-control goes up, dopamine levels set, and then they can make better choices on their own. We don't want to leave them there though, because once again, we should enjoy food and we should find freedom around food and we should have healthy boundaries. So phase 2 is a carb cycling process, right? And
Okay.
so now we're reintroducing slow digesting carbs. Okay.
Which would be
And we're,
like give me an example, slow digesting.
so sweet potatoes, brown rice, quinoa, couscous, steel oats, dark pigmented fruit, like, strawberries, blueberries, things of that
Things that
nature.
come with high antioxidant, high fiber
Yep.
content per gram,
Right.
basically, right?
Right. And there, so the slow digesting, basically the insulin peak is more stable than with the fast digesting carbs, like the white rice, white pasta. You get a big peak and a trough. With the slow digesting, you get a slower peak and a slower trough. And that
Mhm.
and that creates that homeostasis, that balance that most people need, so that they're not hungry, they're overcoming cravings. And so in phase 2, you carb cycle, you strategically do that so that, they're going to get the same. So the first 10, 12 days of phase 1, we see people hurting a little bit because they're going into,
Get that kind of brain fog, kind of
yeah,
withdrawal from
they're missing sugar. I mean, I have people that call me and they say, "Man, I'm depressed." Is that normal? It's like, yeah, you just crushed your idol. Like that's how you were mitigating emotions. It's no longer there, right? So you're mourning your idol. But then you see people kick in, they have all this energy and this clarity. You shift them into phase 2, you start bringing in those slow digesting carbs very slowly. What you notice is they get those cravings again, but you coach them through it so that they can slowly but surely bring those in, so that we're not demonizing food groups. I don't like extremes of telling people you got to be a carnivore or you got to be a
me neither.
vegetarian. It's like, no, you can have a macro balance. You don't need to demonize food groups. You can enjoy food. You just need healthy boundaries, right?
Agreed.
And we just operate out of Solomon's principle. We operate in seasons, right?
Mm.
And so then after phase 2, generally people, and a lot of these people are obviously aiming for a metric. They're trying to lose X amount of weight.
Sure.
What we see in our program, our phase 1, is we usually see people lose anywhere between 15 to 25 pounds
And how many
in
weeks?
6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
Right. And
A lot of
so
that would be water weight. Would you
some of it is water weight, but water weight has to fall off too in order for body fat percentages to decrease. And so
100%?
we see a decrease of anywhere from 3.5 to 5% body fat in that time,
Love
which is
that.
pretty significant.
Amazing.
you know and then phase 3 is intuitive eating. At this point, we feel like, people have been in the trenches long enough. They understand the difference between physical hunger versus emotional hunger. And so at that point, you're making choices and you're saying, today I'm gonna bring in a slow digesting carb for breakfast, and I had a great workout. Maybe I'll bring in one for lunch, but I don't really need it mid-afternoon and then in the evening. Or today, I just feel like being on a phase 1, and I'll eat my protein, my healthy fats, and I'll eat some fibrous carbs and I'm good. And then,
Yep.
so you have options, right? And then the 80-20 kicks in, which says 80% of the time you stick to the parameters, 20% of the time you have some bandwidth to bring in some of the things that you enjoy eating. And
Mhm.
there's a ton of freedom. Monday, you're back on track. You make zone 2 cardio a staple because that really helps.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's kind of the process.
It's
So
interesting
reset,
too
reboot, next step.
well, we're basically you're teaching the same principles, right? You just have
Yep.
different words for them.
Right. Right.
But I love it, and I love the fact that you keep zone 2 in there, because zone 2 creates higher mitochondrial density,
Yep.
helps you process oxygen well, digest better, nutrient partitioning is better, right? Like, you just like, once you get a hold of these processes, it's almost like you're never going to struggle with your weight again,
100%. I tell
right?
people that
You
all
have
the
to
time.
decide how, like, if you're like me, I have to decide how lean do I want to be,
Yeah, 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 exactly.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, people are
People,
like,
when they
well,
first
you're,
come to the program, when I tell them that, they're like, "No way, JT." I'm like, "I'm telling you right now, it's going to happen." Right.
it's a thing because you create such a process inside of your cells, your metabolism. You're creating so much muscle mass and just forward inertia
Yep.
in processing food well, and your palate is no longer that of like a 6-year-old. So
Exactly. Yep.
you're not like when I do go off the rails, I don't eat a whole pizza. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Like
Exactly. Exactly.
I
Yeah.
have
No.
like
And
a kid's ice cream and I'm like,
yep.
I'm great. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Same,
It's
same,
amazing.
same thing. Same thing here. Yeah. And, automaticity, right? When that kicks in, you're not exerting all this energy to make this happen. It just becomes second nature. I see people go, man, I'm never going back there. Like that, just, I'm never going back to where I was. And when you hear that, it's clicked for people
Uh,
right around phase two. So here's something polarizing about what we do for a lot of people. And that's the idea that the first 6 to 8 weeks, we don't want people doing resistance training. And I know for a lot of people, this is like,
okay.
oh, this is different.
No,
Well,
tell me why. Tell me the rationale.
so the idea there is that you have been caught in habit loops, toxic habit loops for a very long time. You get
Okay.
a 50-year-old in your program. They've been doing the same thing for 40, 50 years. You're changing it's an uphold of their life, habits and, how they socialize around food and how they deal with peer pressure and all of these things psychologically are very heavy. And if you're adding a big caloric output through workouts, what I notice oftentimes, especially as you're creating a deficit, is that people are overwhelmed with hunger and it leads to a ton of mishaps.
Mm,
So instead, what we do is we actually focus on the thing that brings the biggest return on investment, which is number one, nutrition, number two, the right kind of cardio, and then number three, resistance training. I'm a big HIIT guy. I love HIIT training for efficiency purposes. I just think I'm a 3 day a week guy. I crush it. 900 calorie workouts for me personally, and so my splits are Mondays I do chest, shoulders, tris, core. Wednesdays I do legs, core, and then Fridays I do back, bicep, core. Right, and
got it.
Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays are for zone 2 cardio. Sundays is Sabbath, right? So I relax on that day. But this is what I teach my clients. I'm like, man, you don't have to be at the gym 7 days a week. Like that's crazy.
Mhm.
No one has time for that.
I love that.
So
Okay, so the resistant so okay, first off, first question. I know now I'm geeking, so just give me a moment. So when you say you're creating a huge calorie deficit, that's just through food choice, correct?
correct, correct.
Okay. So we're not tracking.
We're not trying. That's right. That's another component that we know that the brain doesn't like complexity. And so, we're not counting macros, calories, or points. Literally the measurements are hand measurements. And so I'm teaching people how to basically measure their food, their different
Yeah. What
macros.
should your plate look like? What should your,
Yeah.
about this
The
much
hand,
chicken?
yeah, the hand. So portion control with hand, tablespoons, cups, very basic things that people can
Mhm.
actually do. In some cases, people that have challenges with portion control, with some of those people, I'll get into creating some macro, depending on who they are too. I'll create a macro breakdown for them so that they
Mhm.
can do that for a little while. But then what I want them to do is to train their eyes so that they can actually eyeball portions after they're trained. Right.
Mm.
So just for a little period of time, not a big fan because of my background as a counselor. What I've noticed is that when people focus on metrics, it can become very obsessive and it
Can do.
actually backfires on a lot of people.
Yeah. I find certain personalities, like if I find a guy who's like creative, artistic, entrepreneurial, that dude ain't tracking nothing. You're going to ruin his
Exactly.
day by asking him to break out a scale.
Right,
But
right,
you
right,
get
right.
somebody who's like a spreadsheet guru,
Oh yeah,
they're in their world now. They're like to the gram, right? So I'm like,
100%.
what process is going to help you sustain this? Because again, you talked about sustainability. What's going to make this sustainable? And if you feel
That's right.
like if me tracking right now is basically what I do every day anyway for work, well, okay, that's
Yeah,
just literally just 3 times a day. I just need to check my meals. It's no big deal.
that's right. That's right.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of sticking to the basic stuff, the very simple stuff, simply because if you want to properly track macros, you have to think about the day before what you're going to eat the next day. And then you
To
have
some
to
extent,
input
yeah.
you have to input everything into, MyFitnessPal, and then you can't derail from that.
Yep.
And when you're done with your food, you're done with your food, regardless of, the time. And so that creates so many boundaries. I just think it's too restrictive. I like this idea of having breakfast like a king, having lunch like a prince,
Yeah.
and having dinner like a peasant. You know, and
Still
so
creates restriction, but it's much
yeah,
less like fixed, right? That's why
right,
I've
right,
always I've always helped guys with time restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Hey man, pretty much eat as much as you want of meat, vegetables, some
yep,
some carbs in this 8-hour window or this
that's right,
6-hour window.
yeah,
And if you're
yep.
eating high quality foods, it's really hard to get more than like 2,500 calories. Like
I
it's
tell people
really
all the
hard
time.
unless you're just bathing it in olive oil. You know what I mean? Like,
I I,
which
I
is
tell
possible
people
too, but
100%. I tell people all the time. No one is coming here 50, 100 pounds overweight from eating broccoli.
yeah, that's like I get into these little scuffles online. I don't mean to, but I like to poke fun with people,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
especially like in the carnivore community because I love those guys. And
yeah.
I have people who are actually on those diets for
Yep.
diabetic reasons and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But they'll be like, no, this fruit fruit's making you fat and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, ain't nobody ever come to me as a coach and it was the blueberries making them obese. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
no.
I'm like, dude,
Yeah, no, no,
get
no.
your head out, get your head out of the Instagram for a minute, man. But
Exactly.
so why hit though? Tell me why you like hit. Cause I'm gonna be honest, I don't like hit.
Like,
Like I don't like it. But I personally I don't like it for people. This is just my opinion. Many of the people that come to me are already in this kind of stressful state.
hmm,
So I don't like them hitting that same kind of cortisol button. But that's just me though.
yeah,
Like, but so why do you like it?
yeah. And I get what you're saying. Y- Not everyone's the same. So,
True.
for example, my wife trains with me on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and she's never been a fitness person. Like she just we've been married for 13 years. I think it's taken her 12 years to finally for it to click, right? Both the
It
eating and
took
the training.
19 years for my wife to ask me to help her.
Yeah. For you to be a prophet
And
in your own land.
she'd be
Yeah.
like, hey,
I
I'm not one of your clients. I'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. Oh yeah.
You're right.
Dude, I can't tell you how many, discussions we had, heated discussions
Yeah.
over training and food. And so, she's doing it now. And, I tell her all the time, she looks great. She's lean, she's strong. She's created a lot of conditioning through HIIT training. But I started to say, I think at this point you need to switch it up a little bit. And I think you need to throw some strength days in there. Um, you know, so some progressive overload. And so depending on the person, I mean, I have people that are like, hey man, I'm in this for the long run. I have people that say, I don't have all the time in the world. So for them, these 30-minute hit workouts are very efficient. They get the job done. But not everyone is looking to actually build muscle and, and get deep into it. So it really depends on the person. I find
True.
that for a lot of my people, for a lot of the people that I work with, HIIT training is very efficient with time, with, just hitting muscle groups that work in conjunction, getting 2, 3, 4 muscle groups out of the way in one day.
Uh-huh.
But then I have people that say, no, like I actually want to, hit the gym 5 days a week. And so we do different splits and,
Yeah.
we focus more on strength and, it really depends on the person. Personally, I like HIIT. I think a lot of it has to do, Adam, with the fact that I played soccer for so long and it
You're just
mimics
used to
the
that
ry
high level of
yeah, it
output.
mimics that rhythm. And if I have to sit for 2 minutes recovering from one set, I'm just all over the place.
No, I get it.
Eh,
I get it. And like I said, well, this is one thing I really like about you, JT, is you keep using the word depends,
Right, right.
right? And that, in my opinion, is evidence of someone who contextually knows how to work with people.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I would define an expert as,
yeah.
right? Anybody, the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
That's
The
right. Yes.
Dunning-Kruger effect is the less experience people have, the more confidence they usually have in a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And the more experience you have in that, the more you're kind of like you second guess yourself and you're always trying to
100
figure it out. So
Yeah,
I really like that. I like that you're saying it depends because I'll do the same thing with certain people. Some people, they're like, no, man, I got 30 minutes. So I'm like, all right, well, we're just going to crush you for 30 minutes.
yeah.
And then you're going to go home and be happy. Other people are like, I'm trying to get jacked and tan, bro. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, volume is king. Let's go. You know what I mean?
That
Like,
that's right. That's a
so
different process.
exactly. So, okay. So you and I align a lot on all of this. So
Mhm.
what is the best way for me to get in touch with you? If I wanted to jump into this very spiritually motivated, highly, highly thought out scientific process, what's the best way for me to get connected with you?
Yeah, so, I'm not gonna say I'm omnipresent, that is heretical, but I'm
Just think
all
about me.
over. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm pretty much everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. But I would say coachjttapias.com is the fastest, easiest way to get a hold of me. We also leave Temple Stewardship Bible Study open to everyone, to the public, anyone that wants to come out. And so every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, coachjtzoomlink.com is the link, coachjtzoomlink.com, if you want to come to the Bible study and see what, it's all about. So those two ways, if you want to connect with me directly, coachjttapias.com. If you want to come to the Bible study, coachjtzoomlink.com.
Okay.
Either one, I love when people come out of nowhere. I'm just like, oh, here's a new name. And we get a ton of people come to those Bible studies, and it's an awesome time, man. It is such an edifying time.
It sounds amazing, man. And we'll make sure we get those links. I'll get those links from you
Awesome.
separately, and then we'll make sure we put them in the show notes and on YouTube and in our posts and all that stuff. And then we'll
Awesome,
collab
brother.
with you on Instagram and all this other stuff so that we're kind of sharing each other's stuff. So,
Very
but hey,
cool.
man, JT, it's been a pleasure, brother.
It's been
Seriously.
real. I've had fun.
I really appreciate your heart for all this and helping
Thank you,
Christians
brother.
and people get freedom, real freedom in their physical
Amen.
body so that they can express the same freedom they have in the spirit and their physical body.
Amen.
So I really
Amen,
appreciate
brother.
it, man.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you for what you do.
well, I'm doing my best, man. I'm just trying to get as jacked and tan as you. And,
You come to Florida, I'll show you how to get tan.
that's not hard, dude. That's not hard. Well, I appreciate you, man. And we'll chat again soon, eh?
Awesome, brother. Thank
All
you for
right.
having me.
Thank you, man.
All right.